Every May, as the rigid schedule of the school year dissolves into the vast, unstructured unknown of summer, a familiar ritual takes over. We gather around bonfires and sit on empty bleachers to share stories about restless spirits and haunted asylums. This graphic shows the mechanism of psychological displacement. When we face the chaotic anxieties of an unpredictable future, we project those fears onto recognizable, supernatural shapes. It turns a formless stress into a tangible monster. These supernatural threats often provide a sense of security because they follow predictable rules. Don't look in the mirror 3 times, don't enter the graveyard at midnight. If you follow the rules, the threat is avoidable. A specific vulnerability emerges when we strip away those myths. When individuals seek out the paranormal just to disprove it, they create a vacuum. In that empty space, they often encounter threats that do not follow any established rules. We are examining 3 cases where that vacuum was filled by reality. These events took place in an abandoned tuberculosis hospital, a dark tree line behind a college party, and the hallways of a quiet suburban home. In each instance, pulling back the curtain on a scary story didn't lead to safety. Instead, it left the individuals exposed to the chaotic and persistent nature of human obsession. The first case involves a private school that formerly served as a tuberculosis hospital. Legend claimed that a tunnel in the basement was used to dispose of infected bodies, creating a local myth that the dark spaces beneath the school were inhabited by something evil. On the final night of the school year, a group of students broke in to disprove the legend. They wanted to show that the screams of a recently expelled bully who claimed something evil lived in the basement were just an attempt to save face. They used a stolen key to enter and descended into a massive storage area. Using cheap flashlights, they moved past old textbooks and religious statues until they found a small hole in the concrete wall. They believed this was the entrance to the legendary body chute. One student crawled inside and immediately heard a whooshing sound. When he shouted into the dark, the noise changed into distinct whispers. For a moment, the situation aligned perfectly with the supernatural expectations of the myth. He pointed his flashlight further into the tunnel. 15 feet away, an emaciated man with vacant eyes crouched in the dark. As the terrified student tried to crawl backward, the man shrieked and lunged toward him on all 4s. The evil spirit was actually a feral squatter living beneath the floorboards. The students arrived seeking a ghost and left running from a desperate human whose survival instincts posed a physical threat that no legend could match. Romantic tropes can be just as blinding as ghost stories. During a large college party at an isolated mansion, the lack of supervision and the end-of-semester atmosphere caused normal social boundaries to dissolve. A student noticed a girl in a bright gold masquerade mask watching him from the house. She eventually walked toward the dark tree line at the edge of the property and gestured for him to follow her into the woods. He followed her, fueled by the expectation of a harmless, flirtatious encounter. He stood in the dark, shivering in his bathing suit as the party music faded, listening to branches snapping further ahead in the trees. When he caught up to her, she was standing motionless. He offered her the mask she had dropped, but she didn't move. When she finally looked up, he realized she wasn't a stranger. She was an ex-girlfriend who had driven 8 hours to find him at this specific party. Before he could speak, a second figure emerged. His ex-girlfriend lunged at him, and he narrowly avoided a metal baseball bat that swung toward his head. He dove to the ground and scrambled back toward the mansion, while she continued to strike at the air where he had been standing. The student followed her into the woods because the scenario felt like a movie scene. This reliance on a familiar trope blinded him to the premeditated danger of a real-world relationship. The most significant breaches of safety often occur in professional environments. At the end of the school year, a substitute teacher was cleaning her classroom after the final ceremony. The building was almost entirely empty. She found a quiet student standing by her desk. After he left, she realized her purse was moved from a closed drawer to a chair. She checked her wallet and found that all her cash was still there, which initially seemed like a relief. This diagram illustrates the rationalization trap. The teacher assumed the student had briefly considered petty theft but changed his mind. This logical excuse acted as a barrier, preventing her from realizing he had actually used her ID to find her home address. Days later, the intrusion moved to her home. She found muddy footprints near her shed and discovered her back door sitting ajar in the morning. She initially dismissed these as accidents, maintaining her sense of security through further rationalization. That night, she walked into the hallway and found her student standing outside her son's bedroom. He smiled, spoke to her, and then entered the room, closing the door behind him. Her son was away for the weekend, and her husband eventually forced the intruder out a window. This student used a professional acquaintance to scope out her private life, turning a familiar face into a direct threat to her family. Ghost stories and urban legends serve as psychological safety nets. They provide a structure for our fears, making them easier to manage and discuss. Folklore also provides geographic boundaries. A ghost is usually tethered to a specific location, like a hospital or a house. Leaving that location typically means leaving the threat behind. This graphic highlights the lack of boundaries in reality. Unlike a tethered spirit, human threats possess the persistence to cross state lines and the ability to bypass physical locks to reach a target. The survivors of these encounters were left with persistent paranoia. They spent the following months installing security cameras, avoiding crowds, and struggling to feel secure within their own homes. These stories demonstrate the unpredictability of daily interactions. A brief relationship or a routine day in a classroom can trigger an obsessive response that is impossible to detect from the outside. The most volatile threats are the people who share our classrooms, attend our social gatherings, and quietly memorize the routes to our front doors.